We will talk about general rules of judgment. And I understand that some astrologers in the audience are very experienced and some might be new. So my goal is to introduce everyone, and so for everyone to get something, and we'll start from a little simpler to a little more complex. But let's discuss general rules of judgment in financial questions. And the most common questions that people bring to the astrologers, or we do for ourselves, is sales and purchases, whether that's property or possession. So we'll talk about that. Is the deal going to complete? Is this a good deal, right? Is this a good purchase? Another type of questions we'll be discussing is when we're asking for money, or let's say we landed the money and we want to retrieve it, or maybe we want to get money from someone, or a stipend or a grant. So we'll talk about these. And the final and probably most complicated topic will be the investment, how to choose between a few different investments, or how to basically how to assess their profitability, right? That's the most complex. So we'll kind of build up from simpler to complex. Oh, and throughout this, I will be also mentioning Lord of Fortune or part of Fortune. I interchangeably called it Lord of Fortune, part of Fortune, as it's an important thing to look, especially important to look in the financial charts. I don't think I included a lot of fixed stars in my presentation, but fixed stars are also helpful when they're connected with the part of Fortune, but we'll get to it in a moment. So for those of you who are new, and just to define our kind of scope of work, horary astrology is an astrology where we answer questions based on the chart of the question birth in the moment, right? And so someone asks a question in this presentation, we'll talk about finances. Will my finances improve? Will I get the stipend that I want? You know, will I sell my house, and etc. So horary provides us with a pretty clear and concrete pathway how to judge it. We assign the first house, Lord of the first house, the moon, to the querent. In other words, the person who is asking the question. We assign the second house, Lord of the second, planets in the second, to represent the quasitive. Quasitive is what we're asking about, the matter asked about. In this presentation, it's the second house, or the finances. And when you approach the horary, so you assign your significators, querent is the first house, quasitive in this case is the second, you look at the Lord of the first and the moon and see which one is stronger in dignities, because the planet which is stronger in dignities in the chart is generally more likely to give the gains, or to give the profits, or to accomplish the wish. So it has a primary role, especially as a bringer of financial gains. And as a general rule, that's like a summary of horary astrology in one slide, is a general rule, in order for something to perfect, we call it perfection, right? In order for something to happen, to manifest, such as getting the money, or selling, or buying, or gaining profit, we generally look for a contact between the significators, in this case, let's say Lord 1 and Lord 2, or the moon and Lord 2, and it's either an aspect, translation of light, or collection of light. They help to complete the matters, or to perfect the matters, as we call it in horary astrology. And receptions also help to solidify the deal. Now, if you're new to horary astrology, it is sufficient to know, to evaluate Lord of the first, Lord of the second, see what contacts they have with each other. If you are more advanced, the more you know about receptions and the relationship between those planets, the more details you can provide about a particular question. So just to give an example to those who might be new, even if there are not a lot of new people here, but so let's say a question was asked, I don't know, will I get the money, or will I earn more money in the next 6 months, for example, right? So we assign an ascendant to represent the querent, and Mars, Lord of the ascendant, ruler of the ascendant, would represent the querent, we call it L1, and the money would be represented by the second house. So we look at the cusp of the second house. We have Sagittarius here, so Jupiter becomes the Lord of the second house. And you know, in relationship between these two planets, we make our analysis, our judgment. Always we want to look at the moon in any horary, but specifically in financial horaries, the moon represents, co-signifies the querent, but she also shows the general flow of the situation. The moon is always very important in horary. So if you are completely new to horary astrology, just focusing on these three, right, the Lord of the first, Lord of the second, and the moon would give you a lot of information. So let's talk a little bit about general profit and loss rules. In general, if significators in horary chart apply to benefics with reception, or if Lord of the second is benefic, or you have benefic planets in the second house without afflictions, without challenges, the profit and money comes with ease. If malefics are rulers or placed in the second house, but they're well dignified, profits can be obtained, but with more effort or after overcoming obstacles. So the general principle, I think it's true in all horary charts. If we have benefic planets assisting the house that we're asking about, in this case, second house, there are reception, there are no afflictions, we can expect easy gain. If they're malefics and they're strong, then we can still get the gain, but we have to put much more effort. Again, in general, Jupiter in the second house is very favorable, also favorable in the first, because Jupiter in traditional astrology is associated with fortune, with bringing benefit. Venus is associated, generally benefic, right, associated as a helper, as beneficial planet that helps the matter. So if we find Jupiter in Venus or Venus in the second house, or they're angular, meaning they're in the first or the 10th house, that's a good sign from the get-go. Now, if speaking about lot of fortune, if a lot of fortune itself does not cast any aspects, right? But if we find aspects from the luminaries to the Lord of Fortune or to the Lord of the Lord of Fortune, that helps. We all know that North Node is usually helpful. So if we find it in the second house, it increases the gains. And if we find the South Node, it decreases the gains. Of course, in real situations, there will be complex pictures, as you will see in my examples, but these are general rules, right? So kind of the left and right of profit and loss. Now, if we have malefics in debility in the second house or receiving Lord One or the moon, they show difficulty and loss. So again, malefic and dignity suggest you just have to work harder, or the querent has to work harder. But if malefic is debilitated, it can create problems, delays, losses, depending on how badly it's debilitated. And finally, afflictions to Lord of Fortune or its Lord also damage profits. So these are general rules, and they're relatively simple, comparative to some other rules. So let's consider different scenarios, right? And we'll try to apply this to the examples. So let's consider the first scenario. When we want to borrow money or we want to get our money back, I actually get questions like this pretty often. Will so-and-so return the money, right? Or I will show you an interesting example in a moment. When will I get my money back? So in such a scenario, querent is the first house. Querent person is asking, who's asking. The querent's money is the second house and the moon. Other party is the seventh house, and money to borrow would be the eighth. If we're talking about equal relationship, you lended money to a friend and now you want to get it back, right? So you're, maybe, or the other side, maybe not friend would be the 11th house, but let's say you lended to partner, maybe to a business partner, and you want to get the money back. So their money would be the 8th house. But there are some scenarios, if you maybe want to get money from an organization. I had a student asked in one of my practice group, will I get a stipend from ISAR, actually? So in that case, we look at the 10th house to represent the organization, and the 11th house represents their money. So, in assigning the significators, you judge by the context of the situation. If you're asking for money from a big organization, they're the 10th, the funds are the 11th. If you're wanting to either lend or get the money from the person, more on an equal footing, right? Then it's the 7th and the 8th, respectively. And so again, if we find an aspect between the significators or translation of light or collection of light, then the matter can perfect.